In this lesson, we are going to see how can you use some functions which are a variation of if function, right? So this will help you achieve complex operations and which are inbuilt within Microsoft Excel. Let's look at sum if. Okay, so let's say we have the data here, which is salesperson, region, the sales amount, and the unit sold. Okay, so the first challenge, let's say what we have here is sum the total sales for the east region, right? So if you have to do this, how can we achieve this? So that is the idea, right? So what we will do here is first, the first let's understand the problem. What we need to understand, the total sales for east region. So let's say this is east, 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 east. Okay, so let's say if the operation would be to actually select all of these, and that is what would be the total. Now if you can see this here, it says sum is 20,500. Okay, so now how do you achieve this without tampering the data very much, or without trying to use multiple if functions, right? So if you have to achieve this with if function, what you would do is wherever there is an if statement, and you would have to sum all of these things, and that would be a little complex things. So to address that, we have a default function which is called sum if. So equal to sum if, and if you use this function, you can see first it will ask the range. Okay, so what is the range that you need to select? Okay, so we are going to select the range as this data, okay, the region data. Now here, because we need to check for wherever there is east, right? And the criteria is, we are going to say, is east, right? So you can use double quotes and type in east here, then some range. What is the range where you want the sum from? You're going to select this. Okay, so now if I'm going to select close this, now you can achieve, you can see this is the actual data. Now let's check this east. This 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 and this would be 24,500. See, if I was doing this manually, I could have made a mistake. Then now you will be able to do it without any error, right? So this is how you can use SUMIF to achieve goals, where you need to check a condition and then sum whatever is based on that condition. In this lesson, we are going to see how to use average if, right? So now let's say we have another challenge, which is find the average unit sold by Bob, right? So which means wherever there is Bob here, you want to check what is the total, and divide by the number of times Bob has done it. Okay, so to do it, you have a default function which is called average if. Now, like sum if, you have to select the range where the condition will be there, right? And the criteria is it should be Bob, and then average is from the range, right? So now if I'm going to select the range also, now if you see this, it'll say 3,750. If we manually try to check this, 4,500 plus 3,000 where Bob is there, which is 7,500, and two instances where this has happened, and at that time you would want the 7,500 by 2 will become 3,750, and this is accurate, right? Yeah, this is how you use average if, where you need to do an average when a condition is true or false. When a condition is true, in this lesson we'll see how to use countif. Let's say you were asked to count how many salespeople are there in east region. First, let's see this data. Let's see, we have in east region, we have Alice, David, sorry, Alice, Carol, Frank, and Bob. Means for each salesperson we have the region listed out here, right? So now what we will do here is, if we count the number of times east is there in this particular data, you'll be able to say that how many salespeople are there in east region, right? So how do you do that is you do count if. So if this is the whole region data, and the criteria is east, now you can see that there are four easts in this particular region. So this is how you use countif function. And if say you have a larger database where it is difficult to count manually, this is where uh, this function becomes useful. So if you have multiple conditions and you need to do an average, like here, find the average sales amount in the east region for sales greater than 5,000, which means you have to see wherever it is east, and wherever there are sales amount, out of that east sales amount, you need to see wherever it is higher than 500, 5,000, and then you have to do an average of that, right? So how do you do that? You say you use a function called average ifs, not if average ifs. You select this first, where you would want to do the average here, right? Then where will the criterias will be? Okay, the criterias will be here. Okay, so the criteria range is also selected. Then the first criteria, what do you want the first criteria to be? The first criteria is going to be, it has to be east. Okay, then it asks for criteria range 2. Okay, so what is the criteria now? We require want to do is again in the same sales amount. Here you want to see it should be, this is greater than 5,000, so you're going to select this as the second criteria range, and then now you're going to select it as greater than 5,000, right? So just to explain this, first we will select the average range where you want to actually get your result of average from, and then the criteria range. The criteria range is the first criteria range. This is the first criteria range, and within that, what in this criteria range you want, east you want. Okay, that is entered, and then what is the next criteria range? The next criteria range is this, and within this, what you want, it should be greater than 5,000, right? So when you select this, right, so you want the average to be on this data, and in this condition, in this data you want this condition, in this data you want this condition, and when you do this you'll get an average which is like this. Okay, so let's say if I let's east region, we have, these are the east regions, and out of these east regions over 5,000 we have three in instances, three times, right? So now if you check these three, and the average of these would roughly be, okay, so this will not come, right? So the reason is because we said greater than, not greater than or equal to, right? So I'm just going to unselect this, and if you select this and alone this, you'll see that the average is 7,500, right? So when you do this with a function, you will be able to remove all your manual errors that you do if you do manually. Okay, so in this particular example, we'll see how to do sum when there are multiple if conditions. Let's say sum the total sales in the north region for sales greater than 5,000. Okay, so let's say what we have to do is we have to use sum ifs as a function. The sum range, we want the sum to be from this particular data, and the criteria one would be to select, let's say from here you'd want to select north first. Okay, then you would select north, and then the next data is, next criteria is this, range is this, and here you would want greater than 5,000. Okay, so now if you do this, it is 13,500. So let's say these are not instances, and out of this only this two are above 5,000, and so if you sum these you'll see that it is 13,500. So in this example, we'll see how to do count when there are more than one conditions. Like now, let's say here count how many sales in each region are greater than 5,000. Okay, so let's say now we have count ifs as a function, and the criteria range from where you want how many sales, right? So you can select any particular region. You might want to select this or this for counting. So let's say to keep it simple, you're going to select this. This is the criteria range, and with this criteria range you want the first criteria to be, it has to be greater than 5,000, right? So I'm just going to say greater than 5,000, right? And then you want to select the next criteria, which is east within the region criteria, and here you want it to be east, right? So you want to count wherever it is east and greater than 5,000, right? So let's see how this works. Okay, it says 2. Now let's say wherever it is east is all these, there are 4 times this is happening, but where it is greater than 5,000 is only 7,000 and 8,000 two times, right? So this is how you can actually do count with multiple functions, right? Similarly, if you have multiple range, let's say you also wanted to see how many units were also sold in that particular conditions, you would write another criteria range as also selected this, and then what would be the units sold equal to or greater than equal to, and you would be selecting that, right? So let's say if the question was uh, count how many sales in the east region are greater than 5000, which would bring to these, okay, and out of that you want to say where it is greater than 55, okay. So let's say the question becomes how enter to count how many sales in east region are greater than 5000 and units sold greater than 55, okay. So now what would we do is something like this. Okay, now let's say here, say equal to, the next criteria would be range would be the unit sold, and the criteria would be greater than 55. Okay, now if you do this, now you'll see it is only one, right? So this is how you can do logical operations where multiple if conditions are needed.